Welcome, English language learners, to Learn English with Profi Jaimi. Today, we've got an exciting story, The Wrong Suitcase. Get ready to practice your listening skills and learn some useful English vocabulary and grammar in context. Javier stretched, trying to loosen the knots in his neck. The flight from Oaxaca had been quick, but he was incredibly tired. His morning walking tour of San Florencio was set to begin at 7 a.m., which meant he really needed to be home, showered, and in bed within the next hour. He yawned, rubbing his eyes as he entered the busy baggage claim area of San Florencio International Airport. The carousel groaned to life, slowly delivering a steady stream of luggage. Javier scanned the bags, searching for his familiar black suitcase. It was a common size, nothing special, but it had been a reliable companion on many trips. He spotted a black bag, looking exactly like his own, complete with a bright yellow tag on the handle, the same color as the tag he'd placed on his. He waited for it to come closer, then reached out and picked up the suitcase. It felt a little heavier than he remembered, but he just put it down to his exhaustion. As he turned to leave, a woman standing nearby, her face looking flustered and her movements rushed, accidentally bumped into him. "Oh, excuse me," she muttered in Spanish, not quite meeting his gaze, before hurrying off towards another part of the carousel. Javier barely noticed her, his mind already fixed on his comfortable bed. He navigated through the last few passengers, passed through the final customs checkpoint, and smoothly checked out of the airport. He made sure to hold on to his boarding pass until he was completely clear, just in case. He quickly flagged down a taxi, gave the driver his address, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, he was heading home. He leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes. "Don't forget your ID," he mumbled to himself, a habit ingrained from years of travel. He was almost there. The cool night air of San Florencio was a welcome relief. Javier paid the taxi driver, fumbled with his keys, and finally pushed open the door to his small apartment. He dropped the suitcase by the door, kicked off his shoes, and went straight to the kitchen for a glass of water. He needed to unpack quickly, shower, and get some sleep. He returned to the suitcase, unzipped it, and pulled open the top. He instantly realized something was not right. Instead of his worn t-shirts and souvenirs from Oaxaca, he found a collection of expensive women's clothes, silk scarves, a designer dress, and a pair of high heels. He frowned, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. This was definitely not his luggage. He started to look through the contents, hoping to find some identification. Beneath a neatly folded sweater, he discovered a bright red passport. It wasn't Mexican, the emblem on the cover was unfamiliar. He opened it carefully. The photograph showed a woman, not the one who had bumped into him at the airport, but someone else entirely. And then, at the very bottom of the bag, he found the oddest item of all, a thick, sealed envelope with no name or address on it. His curiosity got the better of him. He carefully broke the seal. He tried to call back the airport's lost and found, but it was late, well past midnight, and no one answered. He left a message, explaining the mix-up. Just as he hung up, his phone rang. An unknown number. He hesitated, then let it go to voicemail. It rang again, more insistently. This time, he answered. "You have something that isn't yours," a voice, calm but firm, said in heavily accented Spanish. "Do not open the envelope." Javier's blood ran cold. He looked down at the open envelope in his hand. Inside were rows of coded numbers and what looked like a grainy photograph of a government building. He felt a sudden chill. "I already opened it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What is this?" But the line went dead. Javier stared at his phone, a cold dread settling in his stomach. He wasn't a spy, he simply gave walking tours of historic San Florencio. He wasn't trained for this. His first instinct was to panic, to freak out. But then, a more practical thought emerged: he had to return the suitcase. Immediately. He couldn't keep something like this in his apartment. He quickly zipped up the suitcase, grabbed his wallet, and called another taxi. He gave the driver the airport address. On the way, as they drove through the quiet, lamplit streets, he noticed it, a sleek, black car, several lengths behind them, maintaining a consistent distance. His heart pounded. This wasn't a coincidence. "Can you drop me off here?" he asked the driver suddenly, pointing to a busy intersection near the edge of the central market, still a good 10 minutes from the airport entrance. The driver looked surprised but complied. Javier paid quickly, then got out and immediately ducked into the narrow, winding alleys of the market. He moved quickly, weaving through the deserted stalls, trying to shake them. He could hear the distant hum of the black car, slowing down. He emerged near the terminal, catching his breath. Just as he was about to enter the main doors, a woman stepped out from behind a pillar, blocking his path. It was the same woman who had bumped into him at baggage claim. Her face was no longer flustered, it was hard, determined. "Give me the bag," she said in Spanish, her voice low and dangerous. "Now." Before Javier could react, another man, tall and muscular, joined her. He wasn't wearing a uniform, and he certainly didn't look like a police officer. They both looked serious, their eyes fixed on the black suitcase. Javier's instincts screamed at him, these people were not official, and they were not friendly. He didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, sprinting towards a dimly lit service corridor he remembered from his days working part-time at the airport in college. "Run," his mind urged him. "Don't stop." He burst through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," ignoring the alarm that chirped briefly before he slammed the door shut behind him. He found himself in a maze of dusty pipes and old equipment. He quickly hid out behind a stack of forgotten crates in an old maintenance area. He forced himself to stay quiet, listening. Javier wasn't a spy. He gave walking tours. He wasn't trained for this, but his instincts told him something in that suitcase mattered to someone. And that someone was very dangerous. Hidden in the dusty maintenance area, Javier pulled out his phone, his hands trembling. He couldn't call the police, he didn't trust the situation. He needed someone smart, someone who understood the law, but who wouldn't involve him in something truly dangerous. He thought of Valeria Ortega, the principal of the local language school where he sometimes taught. She used to be a lawyer before she moved to San Florencio. She was sharp, discreet, and incredibly resourceful. He called her. It was almost 1 a.m. "Valeria? It's Javier. I'm so sorry to call so late, but I'm in a bit of a situation." He quickly explained everything: the wrong suitcase, the strange contents, the phone call, the chase at the airport. Valeria listened patiently, her silence punctuated only by the occasional thoughtful hum. "Meet me up at El Bujo," she said, referring to the all-night cafe near the Central Plaza. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, Valeria was already at a corner table, sipping coffee, when Javier arrived, the black suitcase still clutched in his hand. He slid into the seat opposite her, placing the bag on the floor between his feet. He repeated the story, adding details he'd forgotten in his initial panic. Valeria listened carefully, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she took a slow sip of her coffee. "In my opinion, Javier," she began, her voice low, "this is political. Or something very close to it. The kind of thing you don't want your name in." She gestured to the envelope. "Let's look through this again." They carefully unfolded the paper. The coded numbers weren't random. Valeria, with her legal background, recognized patterns that looked like flight routes and international bank codes. The photograph, when they examined it closely, was of a government building in a country Javier didn't recognize. Whoever owns that suitcase, Valeria concluded, her eyes serious, was moving more than clothes. "This is serious, Javier. Very serious." Javier felt a wave of despair. He just wanted to do the right thing, to give back what wasn't his. But what was the right thing when it involved international intrigue and shadowy figures? "I think you should call the authorities," he suggested, but Valeria shook her head. "Maybe it's safer if we handle this differently. We need to figure out a way to return this without putting you in more danger." After an hour of intense discussion, fueled by strong coffee, Valeria came up with a plan. It was risky, but it offered the best chance of getting the suitcase to its rightful owner without Javier getting caught in the crossfire. "We'll arrange a midnight drop-off," Valeria explained, her eyes scanning the cafe, making sure no one was listening. "At the airport, Terminal B. But with a twist. We'll make sure security is watching from a distance. Not directly involved, but aware." Javier nodded, a glimmer of hope returning. He typed a message on his phone, carefully crafting the words, "Come get your bag. Terminal B, midnight." He sent it to the unknown number that had called him earlier. They arrived at Terminal B just before midnight. The airport was eerily quiet at this hour. Javier placed the black suitcase on a deserted bench near the check-in counters. Valeria stood a little distance away, pretending to be on her phone, subtly observing. Javier's heart pounded. "Wait here," Valeria had instructed him. "Don't speak unless you absolutely have to. Watch for the signal." Minutes crawled by. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows near the entrance. It was the woman from the airport, the one who had confronted him earlier. This time, she was alone. Her eyes, tired and weary, met Javier's. She walked slowly towards the suitcase. "I didn't want this," she said, her voice barely a whisper, her Spanish surprisingly clear. "I was trying to get out. The envelope wasn't meant for me either." She picked up the bag. As she turned to leave, a subtle signal from Valeria. Suddenly, two plainclothes security agents, who had been discreetly watching from a distance, moved in. They approached the woman calmly, identifying themselves. She didn't resist. She simply handed over the bag. Javier watched from the shadows, a strange mix of relief and confusion washing over him. The suitcase was recovered. The airport thanked him quietly. "You didn't see anything," someone told him, his voice firm but not threatening. "Just a lost bag returned." At 2 a.m., Javier finally walked home. Tired, confused, and still needing to lead a walking tour in 5 hours. But that's San Florencio for you: hot coffee, quiet secrets, and the occasional international mystery. The next morning, Javier showed up for his tour with sunglasses, a croissant, and no mention of the suitcase. When I asked him how his trip went, he only said it had a few surprises. In my opinion, that's putting it mildly. We hope you enjoyed today's story and that it helped you practice your English listening skills. If you did, please give this video a like. And if you want to hear more stories and lessons to improve your English, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.